She stood at the edge of town with nothing but a worn leather bag, a child on her hip, and a lie she had been carrying for so long it had started to feel like the truth. Nobody was coming for her. Nobody ever had. And yet here she was, about to walk into the home of a man she had never met, pretending she was someone she was not, praying he would not look too closely, praying the questions would stop before they started, praying that for once in her life, she could just be safe. If you have ever felt like you had to hide who you were just to survive, stay with this story. Because what happens next is going to reach something deep inside you. And if you love slow, emotional Western romance stories about second chances, quiet courage, and love that sneaks up on you when you are least expecting it, make sure you subscribe before we go any further. New stories go up every single week, and you do not want to miss a single one. Now let us go back to where this all began. Her name was Clara Weston, though that was not the name she had been born with. She had taken it 3 years ago from a gravestone in a town she passed through during the worst winter of her life. A small, quiet name. A name that asked nothing of anyone. A name that did not carry the weight of what she had survived. The name she had been born with was Clara Beaumont, daughter of a man who had gambled away everything he ever touched, including her. She was 26 years old. Her daughter, Lily, had just turned 4, and the two of them had been moving from town to town for the better part of 2 years, ever since Clara had made a choice she could never take back, in a moment when there was no other choice to make. She did not talk about that night. She barely let herself think about it. What she let herself think about was Lily. Lily's small, warm hand in hers. Lily's laugh, which sounded like water running over smooth stones. Lily's dark curls and wide brown eyes, and the way she called her mama in a voice so soft it could break you open. Lily was the reason Clara kept moving, and Lily was the reason she had answered the advertisement in the first place. She had found it in a crinkled newspaper left on a bench outside a dry goods store in a town called Millhaven 3 weeks before. She had not been looking for it. She never was. But something made her stop. Something made her read it twice, then a third time, pressing the paper flat against her knee. It said, "Widower rancher seeks a capable and willing woman to share his home and help raise his young son. Marriage offered. Honest work and a roof provided. No past required. No past required." She had read those 3 words so many times that the ink had nearly faded where her fingertip touched them. She wrote back that same afternoon. She said her name was Clara Weston. She said she was a widow. She said she had 1 daughter, a girl named Lily, age 4. She said she was hardworking and decent, and did not expect romance or poetry, only a safe place to raise her child. She did not say anything else. There was so much else she could have said. She left all of it out. The man who wrote back was named Samuel Holt. He owned a cattle ranch called the Copper Creek Spread, a day and a half by wagon from where she was sitting. His letter was short, practical, almost uncomfortably plain. He said she was welcome to come. He said they would speak when she arrived and make a decision together. He said no one would pressure her into anything. He did not say he was lonely. He did not say he was desperate. But Clara had read enough letters in her life to feel what was underneath the words, and what was underneath Samuel Holt's words was a man holding himself together by the thinnest thread. She understood that feeling completely. The wagon ride to Copper Creek took her through open land so wide and golden it almost hurt to look at. Lily sat on Clara's lap and pointed at everything, at hawks circling overhead, at the dry creek beds, at the long, flat shadows the afternoon sun threw across the grass. She said, "Mama, look," again and again, and every time she said it, Clara pressed her lips to the top of her daughter's head and breathed in the warm smell of her hair. This was it. This was all she needed to protect. This little girl. This soft, sweet, curious little life. Whatever she had to do, she would do it. Copper Creek Ranch appeared at the end of a long dirt road lined with cottonwood trees. The house was big and plain, built from dark timber, with a porch that wrapped around the front and a barn that sat wide and solid behind it. The land rolled out in every direction, dry and gold and immense, with cattle moving slow in the far distance like dark spots on a painting. A man was standing on the porch when the wagon pulled up. He was tall. That was the first thing she noticed. Tall and lean, with wide shoulders and a stillness about him that was not cold exactly, but careful. He wore a plain shirt, dark with dust across the sleeves, and a hat pushed back just enough that she could see his face when he looked at her. He had the kind of face that did not give much away. Strong jaw, dark eyes set deep, a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile a long time ago and had not quite remembered yet. There were lines at the corners of his eyes from squinting into the sun, and something in his expression that she recognized without knowing why. He looked like a man who was used to carrying things alone. She climbed down from the wagon before he could help her, Lily pressed to her hip. She stood at the bottom of the porch steps and looked up at him, and she did not let herself look uncertain even though every part of her was shaking on the inside. He looked at her. Then he looked at Lily. Something moved across his face, something she could not name. He said, "You must be Clara Weston." She said, "I am." He said, "I am Samuel Holt." He paused. "Come inside. You have had a long trip." That was it. That was the whole of their first meeting. No fanfare, no examination, no list of questions she had been dreading since she stepped off the train. He just turned and held the door open, and she walked through it. Inside the house, a boy appeared from around the corner of the kitchen. He was maybe 6 years old, with his father's dark eyes and a serious, watchful face. He stopped when he saw Clara. Then he looked at Lily. Lily looked back at him with the calm, fearless curiosity of a 4-year-old who has not yet learned to be afraid of strangers. The boy's name was Thomas. He did not speak right away. He just kept looking at Lily, and Lily looked back. And then Lily reached out her small hand and pointed at a wooden horse on the floor near Thomas's feet and said, "Pretty horse." Thomas looked down at it. Then he looked back up at Lily. He said, "I made it." Lily said, "I like it." And that was how the children met, simple and clean and gentle, like it was the easiest thing in the world. Clara watched it happen and felt something crack open in her chest, something she had been keeping sealed very tightly for a very long time. Samuel had a housekeeper, an older woman named Ruth who came 3 times a week and cooked enough to last between visits. He showed Clara the room she and Lily would share, a plain room with a real bed and a small cot near the window, and clean curtains that someone had sewn carefully once upon a time. He told her the ranch hands kept to themselves mostly. He told her he rose before dawn and was usually in the fields by sunup. He told her there was no pressure, that they could talk in the morning about what kind of arrangement suited them both. He did not once ask her where she had come from. She lay in the dark that night with Lily sleeping against her side, small and warm and breathing so softly, and she stared at the ceiling and thought about what she was doing here, about what she had told him and what she had not, about the name on the gravestone and the life she had walked away from, and the things she had done in the dark of a winter night that she could not take back and could not ever explain to anyone who had not been standing in her shoes. She had told him she was a widow. That part was not entirely a lie. The man she had been promised to, the man her father had bartered her off to, had died. He had died that same winter night, but not the way a widow's husband dies. She closed her eyes. She pulled Lily closer. She told herself what she always told herself when the memories came too close. She had done what she had to do. The morning came fresh and cold, the sky going from gray to pale gold outside the window, and Clara rose before Lily woke and went to the kitchen and started a fire in the stove and made coffee and biscuits because she did not know what else to do with herself and her hands needed to be busy. Samuel came in from outside when the coffee was already made. He stopped in the doorway when he saw her at the stove. Something shifted in his expression, just briefly. Then he sat down at the table and accepted the coffee she poured without a word, and for a long while they just sat in that quiet kitchen together with the sound of the fire and the distant low sound of cattle and the early birds starting up outside. He said eventually, "I suppose we should talk about the arrangement." She said, "Yes, I suppose we should." He said he was not looking for anything complicated. He said Thomas needed someone steady, someone patient. He said running the ranch alone since his wife passed had stretched him thin in ways he had not expected, and the boy was suffering for it, even if neither of them said so out loud. Clara asked how long ago his wife had died. He said, 2 years. Then he looked down at his coffee. He did not say anything more about her, and Clara did not push. She said, "I want to be honest with you, Samuel. I am not looking for anything complicated either. I am looking for a safe place for my daughter. If I can be useful to you and to Thomas, I want to be. That is all I am asking for." He looked at her for a long moment, those dark, steady eyes that did not blink more than necessary. He said, "That is enough." They married 2 weeks later in the front room of the house with the local preacher and Ruth as their witness. It was a plain ceremony, plain vows, no flowers, no music. Thomas stood very straight beside his father, and Lily held a fistful of dried grass she had found outside and called her bouquet, and Clara stood in her best dress, which was not very fine at all, and said the words in a clear, steady voice. When it was done, Samuel looked at her and she looked at him, and something passed between them that was not love, not yet, but was something honest, something real. Two people agreeing to try. Two people choosing each other out of need and ending up with something they had not bargained for. The weeks that followed had their awkward moments and their long silences, and the careful dancing around each other that two strangers sharing a house must always do. But there was also Thomas warming slowly to Clara, sitting beside her at the table when she helped him with his reading, bringing her small things he found outside, a smooth stone, a feather, once a lizard that made her gasp before she caught herself and made herself look at it calmly for his sake. And there was Lily, who had no interest in awkwardness at all, who climbed into Samuel's lap one evening when he was reading by the fire and simply sat there as if she had been doing it her whole life. And Samuel had gone very still, and then very carefully he had put his arm around her, and he had not moved for a long time after that. Clara had seen it from the kitchen doorway. She had turned away before he could catch her looking. She was falling into this life the way you fall into a warm bath without meaning to. Slowly, gratefully, dangerously. Because she knew what she was hiding. And she knew that one day, the hiding might not be enough. It happened on a Thursday afternoon in the 5th week. A man rode onto the ranch. Clara was hanging washing on the line behind the house when she heard the sound of hooves on the dirt road. She looked up. The man was riding a gray horse, dressed well, the kind of dressed well that came from money and not from honest work. He had a wide hat and a thin mouth and pale eyes that swept the property the way a buyer's eyes do when they are calculating what something is worth. She did not know him, but her body knew something. Every hair on her arms stood up. She walked around to the front of the house slowly, keeping herself behind the tree line, watching. Samuel was on the porch. He had come up from the lower field. He was dusty and his jaw was set. The man on the horse said something she could not quite hear. Then Samuel said something back, short and flat, and the man on the horse smiled the kind of smile that has no warmth in it at all. Then the man said a name. He said, "We are looking for a woman who goes by the name Clara Beaumont." The whole world went quiet. Clara stood behind the cottonwood tree and pressed her hand flat against the bark and stopped breathing. Samuel said, "No one here by that name." The man said, "She would have a young girl with her, curly hair, dark eyes, about 4 years old, goes by the name Lily." There was a long pause. Clara could not see Samuel's face from where she was standing. Samuel said, "I told you, no one here by that name. Now I am going to ask you to leave my land." The man looked at him for a long moment. Then he pulled on the reins and turned the horse around. Before he rode off, he looked back over his shoulder and said, "We will be back." Clara stood behind the tree long after the sound of hooves had died away. Then Samuel's voice came, calm and quiet from the direction of the porch. He said, "Clara, you can come out now." She walked out from behind the trees on legs that did not feel quite solid. He was standing at the base of the porch steps, arms crossed, watching her. His expression was unreadable. She said, "You knew I was there." He said, "I heard you come around the house." She said, "Samuel." He said, "Sit down." She sat on the porch step. He sat beside her. Not close, not far. The late afternoon sun was turning the whole ranch gold and copper, and it was so beautiful it felt wrong, all that beauty while her heart was beating this hard. He said, "Do you want to tell me?" She looked at her hands. She had known this moment was coming. She had known it since the first night she slept under his roof. She had just prayed it would not come so soon. She told him everything. She told him about her father and the debt and the man he had sold her to, a man named Gerald Marsh, who was old and cruel and had not wanted a wife but a possession. She told him about the night Gerald had come for her in a rage and what had happened in the struggle, and how she had run with Lily in the dark, and how Gerald had fallen and not gotten up, and how she had stood there for one terrible second and made a choice no one should ever have to make. She told him about the gravestone and the name she had taken. She told him she did not know if Gerald was dead or only injured and had been found by his people. She told him she had been running ever since. She did not cry while she said it. She had run out of tears for this story a long time ago. When she was finished, Samuel was quiet for a long while. She said, "I understand if you want me to go." He said, "I did not ask you to go." She said, "I lied to you." He said, "You told me no past required." I said that was enough. I meant it. She looked at him. His profile was still and steady against the late sky. She said, "Samuel, those men may come back." He said, "Let them." She said, "This is not your fight." He turned and looked at her then, full on, and his dark eyes were very certain. He said, "You are my wife, Clara. Lily is my daughter as far as this county is concerned. Thomas calls you Miss Clara and he smiles when you walk in the room, and I have not seen him smile like that in 2 years. You are not going anywhere, and neither are they." She looked at him. She felt something she had not felt in so long she had almost forgotten the shape of it. She felt safe. He did not say it with poetry or tenderness. He said it the way a man hammers a fence post into solid ground. Certain. Final. Done. She said quietly, "Why?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because the night I found the advertisement I had written, I was sitting at that table ready to tear it up. I did not think anyone would come. I did not think anything was left worth coming to. And then your letter arrived. And something in me decided to try again." He looked back out at the land. The cattle were moving in the far distance, slow and dark against the gold. He said, "I am not going to let anyone take that away." 3 days later, the men came back. There were 2 of them this time, and they had a paper they claimed gave them legal right to bring Clara in for questioning in connection with the death of Gerald Marsh, who had, it turned out, died of a blow to the head that same winter night. Samuel met them at the gate on horseback with 2 of his ranch hands beside him. He had also sent for the sheriff the evening before, and the sheriff was already there. The sheriff was a fair man who had known Samuel for 15 years. Samuel had spent those 3 days doing 2 things, working the cattle and talking to every man of standing in the county he could reach, explaining the situation, explaining the kind of man Gerald Marsh had been, explaining the kind of woman Clara Weston Holt was. The paper the men carried was from a county 3 territories over. It held no power here. The sheriff told them so, plainly. And then he told them to ride back the way they came. Clara watched from the porch with Lily on her hip and Thomas standing close beside her, his small hand finding hers without being asked. She watched Samuel turn his horse and ride back toward the house, and when he got close enough, he looked up at her, and she looked back. And something that had been locked tight in the center of her chest for 3 years quietly, finally, opened. That evening, after the children were in bed, she and Samuel sat on the porch in the dark. No fire, just the sound of the night and the distant cattle and the stars spread out enormous overhead. She said, "I am sorry I was not honest with you from the beginning." He said, "You were honest about the only thing that matters." She said, "What is that?" He said, "You were honest about why you came. You came for Lily. That is the most honest reason I have ever heard." She looked at him in the dark. She said, "Samuel." He said, "I know." She said, "I do not know how to do this." He said, "Neither do I." He paused. "But I think we have been doing it anyway." She laughed, just a little, and it surprised her, that laugh, warm and real and small. He reached over in the dark and found her hand on the arm of the chair and covered it with his. His hand was large and rough and warm. He did not do anything else. He just held her hand there in the dark on the porch of the ranch that was hers now just as much as it was his, and the stars turned slowly overhead, and the night was wide and quiet and safe. In the spring, Thomas started calling her Mama Clara. Not because anyone told him to. Just one morning at breakfast he said it, easy as anything, like it was the word that had always been there waiting. Clara had to excuse herself to the back porch for a minute. She stood there in the cool morning air and put her hand over her mouth and let herself feel the full weight of it. When she came back in, Samuel looked at her. She looked at him. He did not say anything, but the corner of his mouth moved. Just slightly. Just enough. Lily already called him Papa. had been calling him Papa for weeks. He pretended not to hear it at first, and then he stopped pretending. On a warm evening in early June, with the light going long and golden across the fields and the sound of children's voices carrying from around the barn, Samuel came and stood beside Clara where she was pinning the last of the washing, and he said, "I want to say something to you." She kept her hands on the sheet she was smoothing. She said, "All right." He said, "I did not marry you expecting anything. I want you to know that. I married you because I needed help and you needed safety, and I thought that was enough. I thought it would always be enough." She said, "And now?" He said, "Now I think I was wrong about what enough means." She turned and looked at him. He was looking at her the way she had caught him looking sometimes, when he thought she was not watching. Like she was something he had found in the dark and was still not quite sure was real. He said, "I love you, Clara. I did not intend to, but there it is." She looked at him for a long moment, this quiet, strong, careful man who had met her at the door with no questions and held her daughter on the porch in the firelight and stood at the gate on horseback when the world came to take her away. She said, "I love you too, Samuel. I have for a while. I was just afraid to say it." He nodded, slow, like it was a serious and important matter that needed to be received properly. Then he reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair back from her face, gentle and certain, and she leaned into his hand just slightly, just enough, and the evening light held them there together in the golden yard of the ranch they were building into a home. She had come here with a lie and a borrowed name and a child and nothing else. She was leaving nothing behind ever again. This was her place. These were her people. This wide open land and this quiet man and these two children who had found each other over a wooden horse on a kitchen floor. This was where the running stopped. This was home. If this story touched something in your heart, I would love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me which part got to you the most. Was it Clara standing behind that tree? Was it Thomas saying, "Mama Clara"? Or was it Samuel holding her hand in the dark? Tell me. And tell me where in the world you are watching from, because this community is made of people from everywhere and every one of you matters. If you are not subscribed yet, please do that right now. These stories are made with love for people who believe in quiet courage, second chances, and the kind of love that does not announce itself but simply shows up and stays. There is a new story waiting for you every week, and I promise, each one will be worth your time.